Hi, welcome to Conscious Living and Wellness, and we have Dr. Kaushik join us. I'm really excited. He's a neuroscientist, also inventor. So we're really going to be chatting about healing through humanity. So you were on a really beautiful part of what you were teaching and really like dropping into that compassion, and we're having everyone saying like how true that is. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, when you're able to regulate yourself, especially in real time, so not in retrospect when, the damage is already done. So when you're able to regulate yourself in real time, then that opens so much opportunity because conflict is that opportunity to get a deeper understanding, to get a deeper point of view, and to let go of your own belief systems and think of, something different. So a lot of times we miss that opportunity because, we feel threatened, and it's only natural to defend yourself when you feel threatened. In a conversation, for example, if your nervous system is heightened, then you find yourself in the fight or flight state. And in that scenario, it feels like you're a cornered animal. You will either, you know, defend yourself or try to escape. And so that happens as such a rudimentary part of our own evolution and happens, doesn't matter how cognitively developed we are, we still follow the same patterns. So in those moments, learning how to overwrite that, primitive system is such a beautiful, um, yeah, a beautiful learning. And I think everyone should be able to do this on demand.
relevant what you were saying is, we do get in fight and flight, and that's when we feel like we're more likely to react. But it's actually like discussions more that we have these discussions and open to a different point of view that we can, like you said, really grow and really develop from this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, when we are able to do that, a lot of possibilities open. And I'm not talking about, some universe thing that sort of allows manifestations to happen. No, I'm talking about the brain starts to operate in a different way. So when we feel threatened, our brain is quite linear and goal directed. And it is still in that fight or flight state. It wants to get somewhere, it wants to escape. How many of us find ourselves, on this treadmill headed towards burnout? Like, if you just observe the state of your
Mm.
nervous system, where is it at? Is it a functional nervous system or is it a dysfunctional nervous system? So instead of regulating our nervous system, we try harder. Maybe if we tick off a few more things on the to-do list, we'll be feeling better. But maybe the question is, how do you feel right now? Can you be calm and centered now so that you can have a clear mind to then look at your to-do list rather than try to hustle through it?
Yeah, I think that is, so relevant right now is, yeah, like looking and what you, I remember when we caught up and we were chatting for coffee. Do you remember? Well, no, we had chai actually. We were having a chai, looking for the chai. And I remember you saying to me, the number one thing, what do you think's better than coffee? And then you said to me, sleep. And I think that as well. Like, do you
Yeah,
remember you saying that to me? And we don't when we're in this fight and flight, and like you said, in this hustle. A lot of us, if we're probably put it out there to everyone that's watching now, are they getting enough sleep? Are they, really checking in?
yeah, absolutely. It's kind of sometimes difficult to modulate. I understand that, maybe there's an important commitment on the next day. Sleep is what you need the most, but because you're
Mm.
excited about that commitment, maybe you're meeting someone after a long time and you're excited about it. And that night, instead of having a good night's sleep, uh, you can't sleep. And then you wake up exhausted, and when you meet that person, it's not as amazing as you had wished it would be. So these are times when our nervous system is working against us. And so many times we find ourselves in situations where uh, we thought, oh, wow, like I wish I had more rest. Or I wish I was able to connect with this person much more deeply. Where was my mind at that time? You know, so many times when we encounter people, they're in a rush. They have to get somewhere. And we are basically missing those intuitive moments of connection. And, you know, a good example of this is how, like, for me, I walk at a slow pace. And it might look unusual to other people, but for me, I can't walk any faster because walking faster would mean I lose connection with this moment. So I'm walking at the pace where I can absorb. And in one of my walks, I was walking down Bondi Beach, and I heard, this word "lost paradise" come out of nowhere, and I was like, "What? Like, who's saying that?" And there was this kid who had jumped in front of me and said, "Hey, I saw you at Lost Paradise, and your talk was brilliant. I just wanted to thank you." And we started to chat, and he happened to be a rap artist. And the thing was, that encounter would not have happened if I was walking really fast, and he wouldn't have had time to process that he knew me. It wouldn't have happened if, we met and I was like, "I'm sorry, I'm in a rush." No, I took that moment as an opportunity to connect. I was not in a hurry. And that actually led to this beautiful creation that we did, the music video Equation of Love. And none of it could have happened if we didn't have that initial encounter and we took time to get to know each other. So how many times in your own life do you find that, something was too rushed, or that you were left a little bit drained because all you did was give and you didn't feel like you received because the other person wasn't present there? So these are the things that I'm talking about. Like, how can we reach a level of understanding if we are not even there?
Wow. Yeah, I think that, what we were talking about before and what some of the subject is healing for humanity, that a lot of it is connection and being present. It's something that sounds so simple, but in this kind of busy world, it gets lost. So I think that's, really important. What you were saying is like taking time and being present and truly connecting. And I've been guilty of it before, being in a rush and, like you said, meeting up with someone and, we check our phone and not being present in that moment, because in that moment it could be something magical that could be birth. It could be something that, really impacts our lives.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure like this happens more in travel, because in those moments we do have all the time in the world. We don't have, like, when we're traveling, fortunately, unless
Mm.
it's like this road rush that we're going through, most of the time we travel, we find that we have all the time in the world to actually visit places, take in the scenery, and really connect with people, because when people travel, they're not really going anywhere. They're just experiencing where they are. And that's the beauty of it. So why not replicate that in our daily life? And, like, so many times we forget the step we are taking right now and we look forward to the next step.
Yeah, wow. That was kind of one of my intentions this year, to kind of try to live life like what you said, like I was on holiday, like you're more present, you're more open, you're having those conversations with people that, you know, you meet in the street and you're open up. But sometimes we forget that, you know, in our everyday life, like you said, going that slower pace, you know, maybe trying something new, exploring somewhere is accessible.
Yeah, it is. And I think there is a cultural shift happening towards that. A large part of it has been due to technology. And technology, in many ways, has accelerated the evolution of humanity. And in one way, it's caught humanity captive. So, like there's algorithms happening in the background that capture our attention, and our attention has become, one of the most valuable commodities. And on the other end, we have technologies that we can use to automate many of the things that is very mundane. And this is leading to a different kind of economy, and an economy that I'm really excited about, an economy that is decentralized, an economy that is driven by the creator. And it is called the creator economy. And, in these types of environments, one of the things that I find really powerful is that you can be the product of your environment, but your environment can also be the product of you. So if you create an environment where technology is operating in the background, it gives you a lot of time and space to be able to do the things that you want to be doing. And when we talk about, for example, conscious living, sure, you can, go into nature and isolate yourself, but that is, in a way, an escapism mentality. And not many of us have the opportunity to do that. Some of us have families, some of us have kids who go to school, some of us have work commitments that don't allow us to have those luxuries. So in those moments, we can use technology to do the heavy lifting for us. And that gives us more time, more space to connect, to do the things that are human. And I think for a lot of people, they don't realize that potential. And if, for example, someone is a business owner and they're doing a lot of things by themselves, they don't really have time for personal care. And this is where, the hustle culture is keep doing, keep doing, keep doing, and one day you can sell the business. But a lot of times that is not sustainable because, of course, you might be thinking long term, but in the short term, the cost is on your body. And if your body goes on a downward spiral, doesn't matter how many deadlines you've, identified on the long run, it doesn't do any good. So sustainability for me is both internal and external. You want to have a long-term vision. That's really, really important, rather than, the instant gratifications that we get from technology as well. So instead, carving out a long-term vision which provides you long-term fulfillment. And these two things go hand in hand with the state of your nervous system. So if you are in a threatened state, if you're living day to day, if you are only living, for the next hour, you don't know what you're going to do next, you free flow, all these things lead to uncertainty, which leads to a more agitated nervous system. When you have a long-term vision, you have the capacity and freedom to create that because your nervous system is calm and you're making long-term decisions. You're taking more responsibility. You are allowing other people to do some of the heavy lifting for you. And also, one of the crucial things is if you are feeling threatened, you're incapable of making those long-term decisions. So in order to do that, you have to feel safe. And when you feel safe, you can have those moments of connection. You are able to trust more and have more compassion. And that is how you can lead in this conscious environment. And, this is what is not really taught. A lot of times people end up in leadership positions because of their talent, their merit, and how they look on paper. But in reality, when someone walks through their office and asks for help, they say, sorry, I'm busy. I'll get back to you. So those are the moments of leadership that is lost. And so these are the things that, it might seem counterintuitive, but when we do connect to our intuition, we realize that a lot of things that we're doing is counterintuitive.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you'd mentioned with leadership. And authentic leadership is really about that connection. And now, with what's happened over the past few years, is really having that emotional intelligence as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, one of the ways we communicate is through body language. So if your body language is not representing what you're trying to lead, then it's unlikely that people will follow. So if, for example, you managing change, and there's a lot of change happening in the world right now, especially in the last 2 years, like pretty much every month there's some new headline coming up. And in those moments, we do need direction, we do need leadership, whether it be from a parent to a child, or from, in between a relationship, like how do you communicate change with your partner? In those times, it's such a paradox, right? When change happens, we feel threatened, we tense up, and then we're trying to, communicate that. It often falls on deaf ears. So if change is happening and you can pivot with change in real time and you can self-regulate, those are the moments that you can go, hey, look, something's come up, and things aren't going to be the way they were before. But I'd like you to understand how we're getting through this. And you're able to explain in a more coherent sense rather than a threatened sense, which is never heard.
Yeah, and I think that's so important in what sense that you're heard and that you can voice that. And I think that ties into the next subject. What we're really going to talk about is mental health and how to communicate that as well with all these changes that are happening.
Yeah, so mental health is a big one. There's depression, anxiety, there's various forms of trauma, complex PTSD. Then you have acute cases like panic attacks. You have suicide rates. So there's so many things that we can dive into here. If people are listening to this, what aspect of mental health are you struggling with, or have you found most benefit from? Share with us in the comments and we can dive a little bit deeper into that. But I think the most predominant trend is around anxiety. Anxiety has been trending since 2014, and it keeps getting more and more each year. And the last 2 years does not help. There's a spike in the rate of anxiety. So in those moments, we can look at what sort of anxiety are we looking at here. Is it acute anxiety? For example, when you are just about to go for a job interview, you have that sort of like, oh my God, am I going to answer the questions correctly, or things like that. So that's acute anxiety. Then you have generalized anxiety disorder, which is when the state of anxiety has become chronic. And so in those cases, it's not as easy to simply, shift your mindset because there has been a neurochemical shift that has happened. And even if you choose to believe that, you can be free of your thoughts or whatever positive psychology tool that you want to subscribe to, your nervous system is not in that state. And so there is an internal conflict of interest. So in those moments, first you have to align with your own nervous system to be able to rewire that neurochemical change. So, it takes a lot more work because we can sort of look at it from a time scale. We can look at it in like a very short time scale, like 200 milliseconds, like a loud sound happens. Oh, wow, like your heart rate rises just for a moment and you hear that sound and you look towards it. So that's instantaneous reaction. Then when that gets to the brain, then it gets converted to feeling. And we might associate that sound with an actual threat, or we might not associate it. So in those cases, that if it is a genuine threat, then it goes to the next level where it creates a mood. Maybe it was a song that reminded us of, something we reminisced in the past. And that takes us into an anxious mood, for example. And moods can last, anywhere between a couple of minutes to a couple of hours. But if that mood becomes chronic, then that becomes our temperament. And our temperament is very hard to shift. Mm. So when our temperament is chronic, and in this case, anxiety, we call it generalized anxiety disorder. So by that time, it has become a habitual characteristic. So when we look at how we treat this, we have to look at which stage of anxiety someone is in. So if we, treat someone with acute anxiety, something that is just in the moment, it is a different treatment to someone who's been experiencing anxiety over a couple of years and wakes up with hot flushes and panic attacks at 4 a.m. in the morning and then can't go back to sleep. And then they wake up even more anxious because they haven't had the right sleep and they're trying to figure out how they'll get through the day. So you can see how this starts to pile up. And with any problem, if someone doesn't know how to deal with it, the problem keeps getting bigger. So a large part of what I teach is how do you deal with those problems so that you can, when the problem arises, you know how to work through it so it's no longer a problem. And, that is in fact the problem with problems. It's not the problem that is the problem, it's the fact that we don't know how to deal with it.
And yeah, I think what you were saying now, like we're seeing, an increase, it probably ties back what we were talking about at the start of that hustle and like a not enough sleep and then going into that state of fight and flight. And really, we're seeing such an increase in mental health and anxiety and in depression. Would you say that's a build-up of not being present, or?
Yes, so it's a build-up of a lot of things, mostly lifestyle factors. We sometimes don't want to acknowledge the fact that our lifestyle has led to an illness. But in truth, it has. And if we fail to acknowledge it, we tend to rely on the healthcare system to solve our problems. And the healthcare system is designed for temporary treatment. There is no long-term solution for mental health. If there was, the mental illnesses would not be on the rise. It would be declining. But it is not. So we have to look at the hard facts. And to put it another way, if we look at real stats, 50% of ambulant cases are mental health related, sometimes suicide, sometimes, trauma, domestic violence. So 50% of ambulant calls are mental health related. And in those cases,
Wow.
the like the person goes to the hospital and they might get treated if if there is some form of like anxiety, for example. They may get referred to a psychiatrist, but the thing is, no one really helps them on the long term. So they come back through that system and reoffend. And so it's basically a conveyor belt of mental health. They don't get treated and they're just, in an outpatient. And then because no one has taught them how to deal with their own mental health, they find themselves in the same situation. And then they keep repeating. So even though 50% of ambulant cases are mental health related, most of the people are the same. Like they keep circulating through that system. So in terms of healthcare, we spend so much money on treating mental health, yet what we're providing is temporary relief. And people confuse temporary relief with treatment. And in my own work, I've treated so many people. I get them off medication within 2 to 3 weeks. And these are people who have been on medication for sometimes 5, sometimes 12 years. And it's just that they haven't been shown how to work with their nervous system, all the things that are dysregulated within their body, within their brain. And it's so easy when you show simple ways of working with your own biology, and they have the confidence, the intuitive, like they intuitively get off medication. They don't feel the need to take medication anymore. How wonderful is that? And then sometimes the doctors come back to me going, "What have you done to my patient?" Like my patient is no longer taking medication. Like they have a smile on their face. Like they haven't experienced that before. So, it's just, what are we doing with healthcare? Like, why is so much money going into things that are not productive? If you are running a business that is not profitable, wouldn't you try something different? And
Wow.
so, yeah, we keep, pushing money in the wrong direction. And sure, we have, the Lifeline, we have Beyond Blue, we have Headspace, we have all these mental health services with millions, sometimes billions of dollars of funding. But is it only adding to the problem? Why aren't we asking those questions?
And I think that's so important, asking, these questions and having an understanding as well. I know that I watched on your YouTube channel your latest video, which was really interesting, about trauma and actually understanding the root of it. And when you were talking about it, and simple as what we were discussing before, taking that step and just taking a breath. And there's so many kind of tools, like, which, I think is so important with what you're teaching and what you're explaining, that we can use. But we're on a society where we're so reliant, like you said, on pharmaceuticals and quick fixes instead of long-term strategies of really overcoming mental health and these moments of distress that many are going through with with not having a distinction between work life, home life, everything kind of being, it's so easy to get stuck in that hustle.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Once someone is shown how, it is actually quite simple and effective. Um, the funny thing is, uh, a lot of the ways that I treat is already hardwired into your own biology. What we're doing is working with your biology, then against it. And shouldn't that be the norm? Shouldn't that be how we operate anyway? But society is designed in a different manner, and we're not taught. Instead, we are sort of disconnected from our bodies, and we become chronic thinkers. And this disconnect is what is leading to much of the illnesses that we are experiencing. And a large part of my research actually focuses on what this brain-body connection is. And not only have I mapped it in the brain, which is, structures like the brainstem, insula, anterior cingulate cortex, parietal cortex, like these are actual brain networks that is dedicated to have this interoceptive awareness, which is the awareness of your internal organs. And when we place our awareness on the internal organs, we realize that, hey, like maybe my heart rate is a little bit too fast, or maybe I'm not digesting my food because the state of my nervous system feels threatened. And when you feel threatened, like you've probably experienced this, and anyone listening has probably experienced this, that when you are suddenly in heartbreak, like you don't feel like eating. Heartbreak is an actual threat. Mm-hmm. It is a threat because when you were with someone, that oxytocin created a sense of attachment. And when we experience that attachment, it's like a sense of belonging, a sense of family, a sense of tribe. And when you break that attachment and you experience heartbreak, that sense of belonging is stripped from you. And it's like being rejected by your own family or being kicked out of your tribe. And if you are 4 years old and you can't find your mom, that is the feeling you get when you experience heartbreak. It is a genuine threat to your survival. And so we, instead of looking at what is actually going on, we go, this kid is reactive, or he's playing up, he's throwing up a tantrum, instead of going, wow, like, what does this kid actually feel? And so, how many parents know of this and are, basically intentionally helping their kids through these circumstances? Or are they too busy? I used to work at, I wouldn't name the hospital, but I was working with kids with ADHD. And, the parents would bring in their kids. They've sort of illegally parked their car and they're rushing into the psychiatric department, leaving their kids. They're like, oh, where do I sign? Like, all right, cool. Like, you good? Like, they shove the kid at me and they're off. And I'm like, so who has the ADHD here? The kid or the parent? Mm-hmm. And so,
wow,
why are we putting Adderall into kids who is already agitated? And what Adderall does is it's amphetamine. So it boosts your nervous system even higher. But for the kid, that means they're hyper-focused. But what have we done to the nervous system? It's like taking Red Bull to focus. And how many people like are borderline ADHD and are taking Red Bull to focus. Does that do someone any good? Or could you be in a state where you're calm, relaxed, and hyper alert? Would that be more productive? So these are the things that sometimes are hard truths to listen to, but it doesn't stop me from saying these things, because to not do so is doing more harm than good.
And this is so important, having these conversations, because we live in a world where we glamorize being busy. We glamorize, like you said, being hyperactive, when all we need to do is stillness, and finding that stillness to kind of really be, and especially living in a big city. And it's so important to address that, because a lot of people don't realize, like, hi, why am I feeling burnt out, why am I feeling anxiety, why is it this? And it's looking around and being like, okay, when is it that you're ever still? And I think it was really important what you were saying as well, how that can be passed down generationally as well, and picked up. So I think this really kind of leads into that journey of remembering.
Yes, this is something that I'm deeply passionate about, the journey of remembering.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, right, that we go through this journey and it feels like we're moving forward, but the more we get closer to our hearts, it feels like we're actually returning. And I write in my book that, we are the source and simultaneously moving towards it. It's as if we are rewarded for who we are rather than what we're trying to become. And how many times do you find people trying to become something? And where is that sense of fulfillment? Where is that sense of intrinsic reward? They're so focused on external things that they're not in this moment. They cannot be in harmony with themselves, let alone anything else. So that's where that sort of disconnect arises. And so for me, the journey of remembering is actually the journey that is returning you back to your own heart. This is the pilgrimage of the heart. This is the journey of humanity. So how can you have an outward journey when that inward journey is yet to happen?
Oh, that is, wow. Like, drop the mic, like that. Anyone watching that is, I think, that really ties into that healing of humanity, because how can we really heal the outer if we haven't gone within to really heal, like you said, really gone back to that journey of, remembering. And it's not easy. And we're seeing it more and more with what's happening in the world, that people are realizing what is external is falling away to really having to go within, and it's not easy. Like, what kind of tools would you recommend for somebody going through that, kind of getting started to this remembrance?
Yeah, it's to be honest, there is no one tool. Everyone has a different starting point, and you have to honor that. A starting point for someone who's been raised by a family with less conflict, with a loving mom and dad, with, a financial security, is very different to a kid brought up with a single mom who's never knew their father. And as being a single mom is actually the single biggest factor contributing to intergenerational poverty. So the risk of, financial insecurity is very high as well. So you you can start to see how the starting point of people is quite different. And so how you would work through someone who's had everything in life and is still depressed is different to someone who's fought for love every single day and yet not have experienced it in return. So, like every person, every situation requires a different approach, but they all lead to the same place, which is back to the heart. So, for me, the single best approach is working with their internal state, the state of the nervous system. Because when you are calm and relaxed, you are more likely to be aware of your internal state. You're more likely to, be more in tune with your intuition. You're more likely to know your instinctual desires. These are things that we don't put value on. Like, it's the sad thing about intuition is realizing when it's too late. And how many times has the heart spoken and we've gone, sorry, I'm busy. Once I finish this, then I'll listen. And then moments later, the heart speaks again, and you're like, no, now's not the right time. I'm going to meet someone, or, and we keep postponing the calling of the heart. And then sooner or later, we realize that instead of listening to our hearts, what we've been doing is burying our dreams. And so how can you be rewarded for who you are when you're not yourself?
And how we come back to that start of a lot of people finding, how am I coming back to that authentic self, no matter what that start bit of opening your heart. It's a lot of us have kind of found that we were talking about before at the start, is that freedom of forgiveness is really tapping into that love and coming back to that authentic self, because a lot of us hold on that trauma, either within our lifetimes or from the generation before us. And so would you say that from that opening the heart and would be that forgiveness? Or
opening the heart sounds like a simple thing, but it actually is the most excruciating thing ever, because each step you take towards love breaks a barrier to the heart. And that barrier is no simple barrier. It's like something that you held on to protect you. And to let go of that feels like the worst thing. There's so many self-protecting mechanisms. And the tragic thing is that these belief systems were formed in times of tragedy, or in times when we needed help, or when there was no one to help us. And so we created a protective mechanism for us to survive. And now that is the barrier that we need to break through. Who would give up the survival mechanism to return to the heart? That seems nonsensical. Why would you give up what is protecting you, what is helping you to survive? And that's why it's such a struggle. And so, in my own journey, for example, I didn't know I was protecting my heart. I personally was a very tormented kid, aggressive, emotionally unstable, had ADHD, could not focus, could not sit still, just frantic, hyperactive. And I arrived in Australia, and one of the first women I was with, she was into yoga. She was training to be a yoga teacher. And she took me to one of the chanting circles. And when I went to that chanting, it was, for me, blasphemy, because I was among Westerners and they were pronouncing the words wrong. And not only that, they were giving meaning to the words that was not even true. Like, they'll make shit up. And I'm like, that is not true. That is not what that word means. And so I was like, what is this? Like, why are you, like, it's all wrong. But because she was going, I sort of had the obligation, or I made myself go as well. I forced myself. And within a few weeks, I found myself tearing up. And so instead of sitting with my ex-girlfriend, I would sit right at the back of the room. And because I was at the back, no one could see me weeping. And I wept for a good 6 months, like really wept. And I realized that the singing was something that I was holding back on. To completely be free, to let the mind go, to release judgment of myself, to not shame myself for my, like, I'm not a singer, like my voice sounds terrible, to not shame myself for that. And to do something that the mind does not know why. Why would you sit for 2 hours repeating the same words over and over again? To the mind, that makes no sense. So that was the journey to surrender, to do what makes no sense to the mind until the mind lets go. And then the heart has the opportunity to scream. And that is why I was crying, because my heart was speaking for the first time. And it was painful because it hurt. Until that point, it was never heard. So this has been my journey. It's not the only journey that has led me to the heart. It's just one. And so for every person, like, it's not an easy path to take. It means facing your suffering. It means letting go of what you believe in. It means giving up the one thing that you love the most, which is yourself. Who in their right mind would want to do that?
But like you said, what is this world without, without love, without opening up, with like from that journey and opening your heart, what opened up for you?
Yeah, so that's the other side. I personally would not be able to function in life if it weren't for this state. I rely
Mm.
on love, basically. It is once you have an experience of this, the mind chooses to surrender to the heart because it realizes an intelligence that is far greater than its own. And when it voluntarily surrenders, that is how you know that you are in this beautiful state of love, of surrender. And that is half the journey, because once that inward journey is complete, now you have all the time in the world for this outward journey to unfold. So, you know, so many times we follow this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of, self-actualization is at the top and the basic needs are at the bottom. I feel like it should be the other way around. self-actualize, and then all your needs are met. And if we don't know what our own needs are, how can we ask someone else to meet our needs? Like, these are very, very basic things, but it's so counterintuitive. And, you know, for me, I've read a lot, so that has been one source of understanding. Also, I throw myself headfirst into things that I don't understand. And, it's fairly laughable because I always suck at everything I do. But I would not be able to live with myself if I did not put myself through those things that I shy away from. And, like last year, I ended up in Australia's largest poetry slam. I'd never done, yeah,
Oh, wow.
I'd never done,
Wow.
a poetry slam before. And I was like, oh, wow, like, this is a creative space. I'm an academic. I want to experience my creative side. And so I wrote this very provocative poem, and it was borderline BDSM. And when I shared that in front of people, because I'd worked through so much of my own shame and the people in the audience hadn't, they were cringing. Like they were like trying to hide their face. They're like, what is this guy saying? Like, and I felt like, in those Middle Ages when people stone you to death, that's how I felt because I was
Yeah.
sharing my heart, yet it was not being
Mm.
received. Instead, it was being cringed upon. When you're so vulnerable that you make people uncomfortable. And, this is me facing my fears head on. Uh, I used to faint at the sight of
Mm.
blood. And in order to overcome that, first of all, I was doing brain surgery on sharks. So that was like the first step of like, wow. And don't get me wrong, what I did was horrific and it took a toll, an emotional toll on me to do those surgeries. Um, but once I learned to meditate upon the moment and not be uh, distracted into the fight or flight state, I took it to the next step where I do have a scarification on my arm, and that process is basically taking a blade like a knife and cutting through the skin. And it took 2 hours, and I was bleeding for 2 hours straight. And for me, in order to do this, I mentally prepared for it for 3 weeks. I used no anesthetic, no painkillers. It was done simply through a meditative state. And it looks very, like if you look at the picture, there's a smile on my face. And it's so contradictory because I was in a state of bliss when this was happening. I had sort of separated myself from the body. So the body was the one that experienced the pain, but I was beyond it. And so in that state that is beyond the pain threshold, you experience bliss. And that is the state I was in. And so when, you know, people call me a neuroscientist, I'm not the traditional run-of-the-mill neuroscientist. I've actually put to the test all these neuroscience principles, many of which I have been the subject of. And then I've applied it to so many of my clients who have benefited from all these tools and techniques. So, like, there's so much you can learn from textbooks, but unless you jump in the deep end, it is meaningless.
Wow. So what out of all like these experiences you just shared with us, what do you think was the biggest learning?
Biggest learning. um, I don't know. I don't know what would be the biggest one. Like for me, one of the things that I am truly committed to is the devotion to the heart, because my mind has realized
Mm.
that there's intelligence that is far greater than itself. So that is not a practice, that's something that is now innate. Another one is my connection to this moment. Those two things go hand in hand. Because I'm in a calm and relaxed state, that is a nurturing space for love. I've kind of written this in my book that, when we are in the fight or flight, we're rushing around trying to get things done, but we cannot love in a
Mm.
hurry. The,
Oh.
the state of love cannot coexist with fear, the fight or flight. So it's true, we are binary. Our nervous system is binary. It's either sympathetic or parasympathetic, love or fear. And I've calibrated my own nervous system to exist in love.
So would you say that's the equation of love?
Absolutely. It's one part of the equation. It's the first part. So the equation of
Mm.
love, the music video is in three acts. So the first act is what I just described, which is unconditional love. In Greek, it's called agape.
Mm.
And then you have philia, which is the second act in the equation of love music video, which is philia means affinity or your tribe or your community. And that is a big part of your environment. So when you nurture love within yourself, you see the products of love around you, and that is the people who are around you. And then the third act is eros, and that's romance, intimacy. What is those like desires? Sometimes we are afraid of those desires, but when you truly let go and you go there, you experience part of yourself that is so raw that you realize the origins of your own DNA. And all of this, is the product of love, the act of two human beings coming together. I mean, we can go into the biological aspects of that, of how when a woman has an orgasm, if the two partners are truly in love, there's alkaline state in the womb, in the uterus, that allows the sperm to enter the ovum. So biologically, we are meant to create in the state of love. When a woman does an orgasm, then there's a more acidic environment in the uterus, and it's a natural spermicide. It's the natural pill. So that is a natural contraception protecting us against, invaders. So even our own biology is designed for love. So, there's so many things that I think we don't even want to dive into or talk about. And, we just taboo these things. And so we experience the
Mm.
effects of those taboo, that we don't know what true intimacy is like. We don't know what unconditional love is like because we never went there. Because society has kind of dismissed those things.
And I think that's so important. What what you were talking about then is allowing ourselves to really experience love, and in a world where everyone is so busy, and is it real unconditional love, and how you break it into three parts. I was definitely relating with that equation of love, because a lot of us think that we've been in love, but was it really love? Was it really an authentic love? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's kind of tragic because what we see today is manufactured love, the fairy tale that,
Mm.
especially when you find reality TV. I don't own a TV, I don't watch TV, but this sort of fabricated love that is sold to people. And because we haven't gone through those stages of agape, of philia, of eros, we don't know when we meet someone what that sense of true love is. Because in my view, it does exist. But if we haven't worked for it, then we don't know it when it arrives. And so for me, love is the only thing that is worth fighting for. It is our salvation, because each step you take towards it brings us closer to our hearts.
Yeah, and it is that love. When we were talking about healing humanity, if we are in our most purest, authentic expression, and we reflect that love in ourselves, is really how we heal. Is really how together, when you were talking about the different stages of that love, that and it's not easy. It's
Yeah,
edgy. It's all kinds of feelings, and and I loved how you were just so vulnerable with your story about going into that expression of love. So if anyone wants to find out a little bit more about what you do, I know you co-host a channel, Primal Heart, so you have that on Instagram, yeah, and you've got a
yeah,
Facebook group as well.
absolutely. So every Wednesday we go live on Instagram at 12 p.m. Sydney time. And that is, sorry, I think it's 1 p.m. Sydney time. Actually, maybe I'll share that in the comments what the actual time is. It's, I think, between 1 and 12. And yeah, we go
Mm.
live and we do talk about things that are trending, that is on the pulse of society. And it's a free flow conversation, very uncontained, unrehearsed, unpredictable, unorganized, as deprogrammed as it can be. So it's just raw, and we just go for it. So you can tune into that. It's also streamed live on Facebook in the Primal Heart TV Facebook group. And for resources, I have my website, and that's perhaps the best place to go in search of a lot of things that we've talked about today. So the website is drkaushikram.com, and you can simply Google search my name and it'll come up. And also I have online courses, which is on my website. I have my book, Hidden World, The Inside Story of the Soul, and also have the YouTube channel. So YouTube channel is probably the easiest access point to get all this information for free. So for me, a large part of what I do was to translate all this knowledge that I've learned from neuroscience so that it's accessible for anyone. Because what's the point of keeping this in, publications which get like 5 to 6 citations in their lifetime, and no one gets to actually experience the hard work of these scientists. So for me, I'm basically democratizing that pathway. So everyone gets to learn and experience all of this information for free.
And I think, I love how you were talking about, with your channel that you do, how it is really raw and these discussions are so important just to have it out there and for everyone to be involved. And it is a little bit edgy for people, talking about these subjects, but it is so beautiful in your book. I wouldn't recommend, I would recommend it so much. Like, everyone has to have it because I literally will wake up and then I'll kind of open a page and it's so relevant of, what's going on with it now. So I really love your work, what you do and how you really bring, neuroscience, what we were talking about, access for everyone to be able to access it and be able to understand and be able to, really learn and have that access to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, that's the mission. For me, I've made it a point to help 500 million people who are suffering with neurological, psychological, and physiological disabilities. And that number is actually coming from the World Health Organization. That is the number of people who are suffering right now on this planet. And I might not be able to cure everyone's problems, but when they have the necessary tools, it definitely makes life a lot more easier. So that is the impact that I'm aiming towards.
And keep shining bright with your work that you're doing. And even I know, like, end of last year I was going through a challenging time and I thought I had all the tools, but kind of coming back and that remembrance and what you said in your latest video, coming back to breath is so important right now. So thank you so much for coming onto this live. I know we talking about these topics because this is really how it can create change, and this really is how you can open up the start of healing, not only for yourself but for humanity around you, and really access that equation of love. So thank you so
Absolute
much.
pleasure, Jesse, and thanks for having me.
And so you'll drop the link in what time you're in the comments of what time that they can see your IG live, the Primal Hearts, yeah, and check out his website as well.
Beautiful.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a good night.